Hi students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is Cold War alliances, and here are your objectives. Please pause the video, look these questions over, and get ready to copy some vocab terms and take some notes. A superpower is a country that is so powerful it exerts influence over every other country in the world. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged victorious, and these two countries became the world's two superpowers. After World War II, the United States was led by Harry Truman, and the Soviet Union was led by Joseph Stalin. For the next 45 years, the decisions of each superpower would impact everyone on Earth. Even though the US and the USSR were allies during World War II, they had opposing ideologies or beliefs about how the world should be run. The US believed in capitalism, and the Soviet Union believed in socialism. You learned about these two ideologies earlier in class. The disagreement between the two superpowers led to a new conflict called the Cold War. The Cold War began in 1945, as soon as World War II ended, and it lasted until 1989 when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War was unusual because it was an ideological war. It was a war to convince people to accept certain ideas. The goal of the US in this war was to get other countries to follow capitalism, while the goal of the Soviet Union was to get other countries to follow socialism. They weren't really competing for land or resources or money, although those things were important. What they really wanted was to spread their ideology. The two superpowers fought the Cold War in unusual ways. One tactic that they used was called a proxy war. In a proxy war, the two superpowers don't fight each other. Instead, they provide money and weapons to other opponents who then fight. For example, in Vietnam, the Soviet Union gave weapons to Vietnamese fighters who supported socialism, while the US gave weapons to Vietnamese fighters who supported capitalism. And then the two Vietnamese sides fought each other. It was a battle between capitalism and socialism, but the United States and Russian soldiers didn't actually do any fighting. The next tactic is called espionage, which means spying. Both the US and the Soviet Union sent spies into each other's countries to try to steal secret information during the Cold War. And the last tactic is propaganda, which means misleading information. The US spread false information promoting life under capitalism and criticizing life in Russia, while the Soviet Union spread false information about how great life in the Soviet Union was and how bad it was in the US. Remember, the goal was to get people to believe in a certain ideology, and propaganda tried to win over people's hearts and minds. Now let's see how the Cold War divided Europe into rival alliances. At the end of World War II, the US landed in France on D-Day and moved towards Germany from the west. And the Soviets moved towards Germany from the east. In 1945, the Allies met in Berlin, the capital of Germany. Here is one of the most iconic pictures of World War II. It shows a Russian soldier raising the Soviet flag over the Reichstag, the center of Germany's government. This represented the Allied victory over Germany. Once the Cold War began, all the lands west of Germany that had been invaded by the US fell under the control of the US, and all of the lands east of Germany that had been invaded by Russia fell under the control of Russia. And so there became two regions of influence in Europe, a capitalist US-controlled region in the west, and a socialist Russian-controlled region in the east. The countries in the west joined a mutual defense alliance called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was an alliance of capitalist countries. And the countries in Eastern Europe joined the Warsaw Pact, a mutual defense alliance of socialist countries. Mutual defense means that if one country were to be attacked, the other countries in the alliance would defend it. Take a look at this map of Europe during the Cold War. The blue countries in the west are NATO members, and the yellow countries in the east are Warsaw Pact members. Take a moment to identify a few countries that belong to NATO and a few countries that belong to the Warsaw Pact. The boundary between capitalist and socialist countries in Europe is called the Iron Curtain, and it is represented by this black line on the map. The Iron Curtain ran all the way up and down the center of Europe. The Iron Curtain is just a border. It was not a real curtain, and it was not made of iron. In most places, it was just an imaginary line that you couldn't see. But in some places, it was a wall or some other physical barrier. Notice that Germany, right here, was split in two. The western half was capitalist and belonged to NATO, and the eastern half was socialist and belonged to the Warsaw Pact. You'll learn more about the division of Germany in the next video. Alright, now it's time to review the objectives. If you don't know the answer to any of them, just rewind the video and look again. I will see you in class. Bye, students.